sunset there came a summer storm, vivid flashes of lightning, heavy thunder peals, and wild, tempestuous gusts of wind. The anchors held, but Monk lost one of his best ships, the Jersey. She was struck by lightning, which brought down a mass of spars and rigging on her decks, and so crippled her that she had to leave the fleet at dawn. The Dutch fleet had disappeared. De Ruyter had weighed anchor during the storm and run out to sea. Monk suspected that he had gone back to his old cruising ground off the Naze, and when the wind fell and the weather cleared up in the afternoon of the 24th, he weighed and sailed for the end of the Gunfleet to look for the enemy in that neighbourhood. He found no trace of him, and anchored again off the Gunfleet that evening, getting under way at 2 in the morning of the 25th. De Ruyter's light craft had kept him informed of Monk's movements. The Dutch admiral had avoided battle when it was first offered, because he hoped to manoeuvre for the weather gauge, but the failing wind before the storm had made it hopeless to attempt to work to windward of the English. At a council of war held on board De Ruyter's flagship on the evening of the 24th, it was decided to accept battle next day, even if the Dutch had to fight to leeward. When the sun rose, the two fleets were in sight, 8 leagues off the Naze, De Ruyter in his old position to seaward and southward of Monk. The English general at sea had 92 battleships and 17 fireships at his disposal. Following the custom of the time, the English was, like the Dutch fleet, organised in 3 divisions. The van, distinguished by white ensigns, was commanded by Sir Thomas Allen. The centre, or Red Division, flew the red ensign, now the flag of our merchant marine, and was under the personal command of Monk and Rupert. The rear, under Sir Jeremy Smith, flew the blue ensign. Battles at sea were now beginning to be fought under formal rules, which soon developed into a system of pedantic rigidity. It was a point of honour that van should encounter van, centre, and rear. The Dutch were moving slowly under shortened sail in line ahead to the southeast of the English. Monk formed his fleet in line abreast on the port tack. The orders were that as they closed with the enemy, the ships were to bear up on to a course parallel to that of the Dutch and engage in line ahead, division to division, and broadside to broadside. Training cruises and fleet manoeuvres were still things of a far-off future, and the ships of Monk's 3 divisions were all unequal in speed and handiness, so the manoeuvre was not executed with the machine-like regularity of a modern fleet. The van and centre came into action fairly together, but the rearward ships straggled into position, and Tromp was able to give some of the first-comers a severe hammering before their consorts came into action and relieved them of some of the brunt of his fire. The first shots had been fired between 9 and 10 a.m. Till after 2 in the afternoon there was a close engagement, a steady, well-sustained cannonade, with no attempt at manoeuvring on either side, the fleets drifting slowly before the light wind, wrapped in powder smoke, in the midst of which both sides made attempts to use their fireships against each other. The only success was secured by the Dutch, who set the Resolution ablaze. She drifted out of the line and burned to the water's edge after her crew had abandoned her. There was heavy loss of life in both fleets. For want of anything but the most rudimentary system of signalling, admirals had little control of a fight once it was begun. Monk, in the Royal Charles, had to content himself with marking out De Ruyter's flagship, the Seven Provinces, as his immediate opponent, and fighting a prolonged duel with her. He walked his quarter-deck chewing tobacco, a habit he had acquired as a precaution against infection during the London plague. He spoke at the outset with undeserved contempt of his opponent. "Now," he said, "you shall see this fellow come and give me 2 broadsides and then run." But De Ruyter's broadsides thundered for hour after hour. However, the dogged persistency of the Dutch was met with persistent courage as steady as their own. London listened anxiously to the far-off rumbling of the cannonade on the North Sea waters. Mr. Pepys went to Whitehall and found the court gone to chapel, it being St. James's Day. Then he tells how, quote, "By and by, while we're at chapel, and we waiting chapel being done, come people out of the park telling us that the guns are heard plainly, and so everybody to the park, and by, the chapel done, the king and duke into the bowling green and upon the leads, whither I went, and there the guns were plain to be heard, though it was pretty to hear how confident some would be in the loudness of the guns, which it was as much as ever I could do to hear them. All the eastern counties must have heard the cannon thunder droning and rumbling like a far-off summer storm through the anxious hours of that July day. As the afternoon went on, even Dutch endurance found it hard to stand up against the steadily sustained cannonade of Monk's centre and van divisions, and De Ruyter and Evertszoon began to make sail and work further out to sea, as if anxious to break off the fight. Monk, Rupert, and Allen, with the white and red divisions, followed them up closely, making, however, no attempt to board, but keeping up the fire of their batteries, and waiting for a chance to capture any crippled ship that might fall astern. 4 of the enemy were thus taken, so the main bodies of both fleets worked out into the North Sea on parallel courses, making no great way, for the wind was failing. The rear divisions, Tromp's and Jeremy Smith's ship, did not follow the general movement, for Tromp had never quite lost the advantage he had gained in the open stage of the battle. He kept his ships under shortened sail and hammered away doggedly at the Blue Division. This was the moment when Monk might well have either reinforced Smith or turned with all his force on Tromp, and overwhelmed and destroyed his squadron. It was made up of 25 line-of-battle ships and 6 frigates, and its loss would have been a heavy blow to Holland. But on sea, as on land, there was still little of the spirit of ordered combination. Just as Rupert at Marston Moor had destroyed the opposing wing of the Roundheads with a fierce charge of his cavaliers, and then pursued without a thought of using his advantage to fall upon the outnumbered and exposed centre of the enemy, so now Monk and Rupert pressed upon De Ruyter and Evertszoon, though Tromp was at their mercy, and Smith was in serious peril. Thus the engagement broke into 2 separate battles as the summer evening drew on. Darkness ended the fight, and in the night the wind fell almost to a calm. Sunrise on the 26th showed the fleets drifting in disorder on a smooth sea, with their heavy sails hanging loose from the yards, only filled now and then by disappointing flaws of wind. The crews were busy repairing damages and transferring the wounded to the lighter craft. All day the only shots fired were discharged by a couple of brass toy cannon mounted on a pleasure yacht which Rupert had brought with him. Taking advantage of a mere ruffle of wind, so light that it could not move the big ships, the Cavalier Prince ran his yacht under the stern of the huge flagship of De Ruyter and fired into him. The Dutchman had no guns bearing dead aft, and the Prince was able to worry him for a while, till there came one of those stronger gusts of wind that filled the sails of the 7 provinces, and she swung around, showing a broadside that could well blow the yacht out of the water. But before a gun could be fired, the yacht, with all sails spread, was racing back to the English fleet, and Rupert returned to the Royal Charles, as pleased as a schoolboy with his frolic. During the night of the 26th the winds rose, and De Ruyter steered for the Scheldt, followed up by Monk's 2 divisions. The Dutch admiral covered his retreat with his best ships, and a running fight began at dawn. Even before the sun rose, the sounds of a heavy cannonade had come through the darkness, telling that Tromp and Smith were hard at it again in their detached battle. Early in the day Monk abandoned the chase of the Dutch and steered towards the sound of the cannonade. Soon the fleet came in distant sight of the battle. Tromp, with the Zeeland squadron, was making a dogged retreat, working to the southeast, close hauled on the wind from the northeast. Monk tacked and made more than one attempt to place himself across the course of the Dutchmen, hoping to catch them between his fleet and Smith's Blue Division, as between hammer and anvil. But Tromp slid between his enemies and was before long in full sail for Holland, with the 3 English divisions combined in a stern chase. Monk said that if Smith had pressed Tromp closer earlier in the day, his retreat would have certainly been cut off. Smith and his friends protested that if the general at sea had laid his fleet on a better course, Tromp would have been taken. The honours of this last move in the game were with the Dutchman. A substantial victory had been gained, though there were few trophies to show for it.